You may be familiar with the Twinspears, but aside from a few weapon showcases, you likely haven't heard much about this weapon. It's probably fair to say that the consensus is that it isn't a very good weapon. I'd like to take a few minutes to convince you that not only are they viable, they deserve your respect. So before we can talk about the weapon's moveset, and how to actually use it, we need to get them. The spears are located after beating Pontiff Solomon in the post-Pontiff area, carried by this Jon Snow wannabe. He's easy enough to parry, so he should not pose too much of a threat to you. Dispatch of him, and we can move on to the weapon itself. Now that we have the weapons, we should figure out what builds to use with it. The answer to this is actually resoundingly dex. The base requirements for the Twinspears are 14 strength and 20 dexterity. Once you hit both soft caps, stick to dex, and you can make it work at most levels. If you want to, you can go to the SL45 for low level invading, or 125 for proper gank spanks if you want to. Either way, you'll be rewarded with high damage and incredible punishes if you invest the points needed to make this weapon shine. Good breakpoints to look for when you're leveling up your dexterity is 40 and 80 dexterity. While the spears can work with less, you do want to try and get as much bang for your buck as possible. Let's start with the basics. Why do I love these spears so much? Is it the high damage, a great range, maybe even the moveset? Well, the answer is actually all the above. So these spears pack a real punch, letting you easily hit damage numbers around 500 to 600 damage in just 2 L1s, which will be your main bread and butter attack. Along with the ability to combo your R1s into L1s, you with that have a pretty deadly moveset. You just have to try and avoid using your weapon art, as the charge is not really worth all that much. The length of the Twinspears also makes them a serious threat from a distance. To be exact, the side slash hitbox is roughly 60 SP long. For some of you, that'll sound familiar, as that is the same length as the one-handed mace R1. The active range of the L1s are the same as the so-called death zone of a crossbow, so if you're comfortable with X-bow, you'll probably find the spears to be right up your alley. To those not familiar, the so-called death zone from a crossbow is the active range in which it is impossible to reaction roll an exploding bolt at your feet. Now let's talk the nitty-gritty details of this moveset. The first L1 starts out with a quick side swipe with a little spear, followed by a thrust of the longer spear. The strange initial slash activates very early, and really lets you mix up the attack timing. It'll certainly make it a lot more fun to fight the average parry spammer. That's not all though, you can actually dead angle the first L1. And you heard me right, you can dead angle this spear with the slashing sideways hitbox, making it impossible to get parried. Also worth noting is the rolling L1. This is the move most players have experience with. It is just as fast as the pre-nerfed Gotthard's rolling L1, but with spear range. It gets counter hits, much like Gotthard's does, and it's almost unreactable at close range. One thing to take heed of though, is that this move, while often just spammed, can actually be used as a rolling mix-up. It's much like how you might mix up rolling R1s and normal standing R1s of a Ultra Greatsword. If you use this correctly, it'll add an extra layer of depth to your playstyle and should also help motivate you in the way you should play the weapon. So as touched upon earlier, Twinspears have some weaknesses. Despite their timing mix-ups, they happen to be quite easy to parry at times. This is usually on reaction, which means we will have to try and do something to try and avoid these parries, especially when they're being thrown out there wildly. The best way to avoid this is to either dead angle your L1s or go for a mix-up if they try and face tank parry you. If you predict a parry attempt, you can either go for a backstab or mix up your follow-up attack after you land the second L1. The R1, L1 and R2 all have different timings after the second L1. Therefore, if they whiff the parry timing, they'll eat the rest of your combo for the attempt. So presuming you followed my advice and stuck to a dex build, we can assume that you have access to some common dex weapons. The two main ones I'm going to point out to you are the Hollow Slayer and Soul Swords, since I think they're good complementary weapons for the build. The Soul Swords are useful for their high damage and good chase down potential. The Hollow Slayer can be quite nifty for getting someone to back off of you. If you hard swap to it unexpectedly, then suddenly people will have to back off of you. Both weapons also benefit from the fact that they have a narrower hitbox compared to the spears. The Twinspears do have an annoying tendency to ding on walls due to the side/hitbox of the first L1, so keep in mind when fighting someone in a small corridor that it would be optimal to switch instead of using the spears exactly here. What I'm about to show you cannot truly be done justice with words, so instead, take a look at this. What you just saw was the Twinspears L1 plus L1 combo true comboing with a two-handed ultra great sword R2 on reaction. The only other weapon that can replicate this combo is the Drang Twinspears, which should get some of you pick and poker enthusiasts excited. The combo is also able to take almost any phantom or host from 100 to 0 in the span of seconds. All you have to do is hit L1, delay half a second, and then hit L1 again. In that time, your co-invader can have fully charged an R2 on reaction. This, of course, is the part where you will see gankers using it for the next little while, if they even see this video to begin with. But don't worry, gankers are bad after all. So, I've decided to officially call this combo the Twin Spear Tangle. And I hope to see all of you guys out there in the wild using it, and hopefully get some co-invasions while we can use it together. And that's about it from me. I hope this video helped some of you get a feel for a cool underused weapon with far more to it than you might have first thought. Thank you all for watching, and before I go, I hope you will all go and give some love to the people that inspired me to make this video to begin with. Namely, Fel for his fantastic pick and poker guide, and Dangitjm for his wonderful weapon guides. Thank you all so much for watching, and with that, I'm out.